What's up, everybody, and welcome to a Tuesday edition of Morning Cuppa Hockey presented by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. So use our code NATION, NATION, in all caps. Colby is still feeling under the weather today, so I am joined by a good friend of the show, Carter Hutton, who's here to discuss everything that went down yesterday and tee up what we've got coming Thursday. It's going to be a long 2 days, today and tomorrow, as we wait for the matchup, the rematch that everyone wanted for and everyone's been waiting for in USA versus Canada on Thursday night. But Carter, let me ask you right off the bat here, just talking about Finland and Sweden, because I don't want to overlook those two teams. Based on the 3 games they played, how would you assess their tournament? And would you say that both teams almost exceeded expectations?
I think so. I think overall it was pretty awesome, right? You look at Sweden and how fragile it is. Obviously a big win last night. And again, you can always make the statement that, obviously USA didn't have anything to play for at that point, but they were going. And I think early on they scored in the first shift of that game. Sweden could have easily collapsed and just fell apart. And I thought Ersson was great last night, their decor. And then you look back to that round robin games, right? They lose in overtime to Finland. They lose in overtime to Canada. And right there, it just shows you, and they had a couple of good chances in those games to win, right? Bennington made a couple big saves in overtime, which I think kind of saved the tournament for Bennington, right? I think if they knock out Canada in overtime in that game, if they beat them, I think we might not even see Bennington again, right? So it is just so fragile, and it goes to show you that the margins are so thin for these teams. And as for Finland, you're looking at some of the players are missing, like Miro Heiskanen being out of the lineup. There's a guy that can carry the mail on any of these teams, right? He's one of the most overplayed defenseman in the league. Like, he has just unbelievable cardio. He can hang around. He's such a good player. So I think it was something rewarding for them. I think we saw a little lack of goaltending at times for them. Sometimes where, we talked about this a little earlier in the show, like you have a must-win game there too, and they go to Kevin Lankinen. I know he won the game in overtime after Saros was pulled, but I think in that game against the Canadians, it was over before it began, right? They get 2 quick ones on Lankin, and he's in a little bit over his head. And I think Saros was very good after that in that game. So I think overall, there's a lot to build off of, and it's nice to see how close everybody is in this tournament.
Is there anyone on Finland or on Sweden right now? And I do want to go back in a second about Saros, but do you have more appreciation for any player on those teams? Like, is there someone that really stood out to you in, these 3 games that you maybe just on their NHL team, you're not as appreciative of how good they are compared to playing against the best of the best?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some players that stood out. I think the decor, obviously, for Sweden were unbelievable, right? And I think as you look down that line, I'm talking about Jonas Brodin. I think for him was a guy that really had a coming out party. I thought he played great, especially for a guy who, maybe in Minnesota is a market where you kind of are just hidden, right? They don't really play a flashy brand of hockey, and you start to see why they are good. And for me, I thought who played very well, who's always had that again, maybe mark on his career defensively. I thought Rasmus Dahlin was unbelievable. I thought with a chip on his shoulder, he played very well. And again, I think there is a little bit of a longer leash and more confidence when you're looking down your bench and you're playing with all these guys too, right? I think there is instilled confidence. I thought Granlund was great for Finland. He had some big goals. I thought and he's a guy that scored a ton of goals and been in big moments. And again, a guy that just seems to be like a accessory player, right? He bounces around a lot. He gets trade. He gets moved. He doesn't really have a home per se. So I think that was big for him. And again, I think Barkov, just the minutes he plays and logged against the best players is always so impressive for me. And not that that's any surprise, but it seems like he is a guy who can consistently bring it all the time. Was there anybody for you that you thought was like a big coming out too, Johnny?
Honestly, not a coming out, but whenever so I've been to, I think, 4 games now. I was at 2 of Sweden's games, and the people I was sitting next to, I sat next to a couple of Boston College players last night, and the one thing that they kept saying is, oh my God, Victor Hedman is so big out there. No one really understands Hedman through the TV, but when you're in person, the guy is a monster, and he is honestly, he shuts down every play. It's not fancy, but he makes the right reads, probably 95, 100% or 98, whatever, 99% of the time. Obviously he's playing against some really strong players, and it's tough to make the right play every time in these games. But Victor Hedman is the one where you just kind of forget how good this guy still is, because he's been around for so long. And we talk about the Makars, Quinn Hughes, all these younger defensemen now that have stepped up and become the big names in the NHL. But Victor Hedman has done it now for over a decade, and sometimes he gets forgotten about. And Tampa is a team too that in the regular season, no one really ever talks about. Like, they're always around come playoff time, but they're not always the sexiest regular season team. So I think Hedman kind of gets lost in the conversation a little bit. And watching a couple of the Sweden games in person, just noticing him almost every time he's out there, like running the power play, getting shots through, blocking shots, being in good position, having an active stick, just the way he moves at 6'6", and I see Carousel Vertical going 6'6", 245, like that is a truck on Case. You know, it's insane. So he's the one that stood out for me. And honestly, in an underwhelming fashion, since the trade, like Mikko Rantanen has not looked like the Mikko Rantanen that we're used to seeing. And this tournament, I thought maybe would bring out more in him because in Carolina, the production hasn't really been there since the trade went down. And it wasn't really there, you know, so far or I guess the entire time for Finland in this tournament. Like it's been tough for him.
Yeah, I feel like that is a great point, Johnny, too. Especially like you look at his season so far, like he gets moved out. It's been disappointing. And obviously Martinicius on the other side has gone into Colorado and done very well, right? So I think it's one of the factors of Colorado looks pretty smart right now. They look like they were the ones that understood that how much McKinnon brings to the table, and he thought that he was just kind of riding shotgun with him, right? So for Rantanen, I definitely think it was underwhelming by any means. Patrick Laine, same thing. Again, I guess I've never been a huge Laine fan. Like I love his shot, his release. I've been victim to it many times. And again, I just think in this international play, when it's best on best, you don't really get like free looks, right? It's so hard to generate anything, right? When we look at the decors of every team, especially Finland, you could say probably, well, I guess we can definitely say that they have the worst back end, right? So you're playing against Canada's back end, you're playing against USA's back end, who's been unbelievable, Sweden's back end. And I thought Laine just leaves me wanting more, right? He's just like, I feel like it's so much fluff in his game at times, and I feel like he wants to play that perimeter game. And I think in this best on best, it just doesn't translate very well. So it was obviously fun to watch. And again, injuries, you know, obviously be interesting to see if Heiskanen's back and then a few players back in the lineup. I think for every team, right? I think every team could probably make that argument if they could have a few different players in there. But I think this sets the table well for the Olympics too. And I think it gives them a big look of who is going to play and who is going to be able to be productive in this best on best.
Yeah, and that's what all these guys are looking forward to also. I was talking to a couple of parents of Team USA, some people that I know last night, and you know, even just asking them like what it's been like for them as parents watching their kids play and how awesome it's been to see them in the USA jersey. You know, one of the fathers was like, it's still a job for them. And like, they're not losing sight of the fact that next year is what it's really all about. Like, you know, if they can't play in Thursday's game because they're injured, like while it would suck, it's almost not the end of the world or the end all be all, because they do have the understanding that this is an exhibition tournament. You don't grow up dreaming of winning the Four Nations. You grow up dreaming of winning the Olympics. And I don't want to take anything away from this tournament because it has been amazing. But I think it was interesting to hear a parent's perspective and, you know, hear what the players are thinking too, because they understand that come Saturday, they're back in their NHL jersey, you know, and they have a job to do. And that sucked, like not being able to watch, you know, Austin Matthews last night and McAvoy, obviously, and Matthew Tkachuk, guys who are out with injuries. I'm sure we'll get into that in a minute. But while this game Thursday night does mean a lot, there still are things that, you know, maybe don't make it as big as what that Olympic gold medal means or other things like that. So that definitely changed my perspective. Like, I know, you know, some people aren't even, some family members aren't staying for Thursday just because like they have work and real life things that they have to get back to. Yesterday, obviously being a holiday, so families were able to come up and whatnot, but I'm getting a little off topic here. I'm just, you know, it was interesting to hear like the coming back down to life reality of what this tournament actually is. While all the fans are super excited, these players, like, you know, they missed the chance of getting that break that they might need later on, you know, in the season. Like the guys that got to go on vacation will be well rested, and these guys are putting their bodies in the line now for 3-4 games, and they have to get right back into the grind on Saturday. It's a lot of hockey, man. But these guys have battled, and credit to Finland and Sweden the whole time. You know, they battled to the very end, and that game last night I thought could have been just a skill game, meaningless, but you know, both teams still played pretty physical, I thought.
Yeah, I guess I get where the family member's coming from, and I get maybe from the other side, but like I think anyone's full of shit if they're thinking that this game isn't going to be the biggest game for some of these guys.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I mean, this is going to be, they're going to tear the hinges off this place Thursday night, in my opinion. And yes, I get like the fact of like the Stanley Cup and the Olympic gold have its presence, but right now there is like a turf war for who owns hockey. right?
Yeah.
And I feel like this is the stage. And yes, I understand the Four Nations Cup is a cup that is going to be won and then it's going to be gone, right? This is just not something that has a tradition and has a legacy and has history. But I also feel like this is a game where these guys are going to try to show who's best, right? And I feel like they're going to really try to dominate this game, whether it's, you're going back to your teams or they're planning for the Olympics, and that's going to be bigger. But I think because of that length of schedule where we haven't seen international hockey for so long, it means to watch this, guys. And again, I think we're seeing the repercussions of a crazy Saturday night, right? You see so many injuries, so many things going on. And I saw a few people tweeting about that and talking about like, well, if hockey was like this, I would always watch it. Well, there's no sustainability in this game.
Yeah.
Right? This is like one and done. This is really hard to play, but I expect Thursday night to be a lot of fun. And yes, there is that fact of teams, if I'm a fan, I'm worried. If I'm a Boston Bruins fan, Charlie McAvoy, I'm worried about Brady Tkachuk. I'm worried about these situations where guys are banged up. But at the same time, there's a lot of pride on the line. And I think this is going to be a great game, especially because it felt like Saturday was the final. Do you not feel that way? Like I felt like the way that hockey world reacted was like, we're the best, USA, the fights, everything set the table, where I'm like, Thursday's still the game, right? Thursday's the game to win. So it's going to be interesting to see. And again, I think there's so many storylines going into it. This is great for hockey, right? The whole world was watching Saturday night. And I think Thursday night's going to be no different.
Well, that's a point I wanted to make too. And just to transition a little bit here before I do, I want to give a quick word from our sponsor, Proraso, the most complete choice for shaving and beard care, made in Italy since 1948. Proraso has been a staple of Italian culture and barbershops globally for 4 generations. So get 15% off at Proraso-USA.com with our promo code Hockey15 in all caps, Hockey15. And the question that I want to ask you, because I was in the building last night and I know it's a tough game to get up for because it was meaningless. But that said, it was still Team USA's first game of this tournament on home soil. And, maybe outside of the first minute of the game, because Chris Kreider scores 35 seconds in, everyone was fired up from the anthem. The crowd was nowhere near what it was at the Bell Center. And I'm wondering what it was like through the TV and if it translated at all, just the overall rowdiness and the atmosphere of the crowd, because being there, I thought I would have a little bit more chills, like I kind of did in Montreal. But, man, I don't know. Like the crowd just did not seem all that into it last night. I know they, got a couple chances in the end, but I'm wondering what you thought through the TV.
Yeah, no, it didn't feel the same, right? I think early on, a little bit of energy, but not the same intro, not the same. But I also feel like walking into a rink knowing that it's a nothing game at the end of the day. Not that it's a nothing game. That's not the right way for me to put this, right? But for me, it is the fact of the matter. They're going to a game where it's like there's really nothing on the line, right? Where every game is at so much value, where I think it will be a different atmosphere Thursday. And I also feel like there's going to be a good Canadian extended there. There's going to be a lot of Canadian fans. There's going to be a lot of American fans, a lot of energy. And we're talking about TD Garden, right? This is a town that knows hockey, right? I've had a chance to play at TD Garden. I've had a chance to be around Boston. I went to school at Lowell for 4 years. These are hockey fans. And talk about a proud country, right? Like this is a place that is going to have a chip on its shoulder. I think there's going to be a lot of energy there. So I think it will be better Thursday. And I definitely didn't feel the same energy. Obviously, you were boots on the ground, but even TV, I don't think it did it justice by any means.
So let's get into this matchup, that we're going to talk about, USA versus Canada, for the next 2 days. And I'm seeing a lot of comments in the chat about Werenski and Slavin, who have been phenomenal. Zach Werenski, I mean, dude, that guy, his skating, just watching him live in person for the past, 3 games or so, the way that guy moves, it's very effortless. His stride, it doesn't look like he's necessarily moving his legs that fast, but he's moving up and down the ice so quickly. The play he made on Kreider's goal to start the game last night, just a great read, quick first 3 steps out of the slot, joins the rush, makes the play happen, goes underneath the stick, makes the move, and Kreider follows it up. He's one guy that I think we talk about has exceeded expectations possibly, and now is becoming, maybe one of the top, definitely one of the top 3 United States defensemen, but he's had a real breakout year in the NHL this year. And I'm curious if anyone on Team USA has stood out to you a little bit more as well. And then we'll move into Canada too.
Well, it's hard to not go about everyone in their back end has been like rock solid and it's been impressive. And I think Werenski, this is like his coming out party, right? Like he's always been good, but now it's like he's in that upper echelon of like the guys, right? Like he is one of the best in the world. He's really shown that. And for me, which is not surprising, I think Jack Eichel has been an absolute beast. Like an absolute beast out there. I'm a little biased, right? I got to spend 3 seasons with him in Buffalo. And I've always made this argument that he's the best player I ever played with. Like, and I've played with a lot of good players. But when Jack is on his game, he is so dominant. At times last night, the way he can use his body physically and put guys on his hip and these are the best players in the world, right? So I guess for me, not that to any surprise, like I think Jack Eichel has been awesome. I think Matt Boldy plays a complete game for a younger guy. He's going to just continually get better. And then for me, I think it's just Jake Getzel. I think Jake Getzel for the American team, just timely goals, his knack around the net. He doesn't really wow you at times, right? But I just think he has a presence on the rink where he's a threat every single time he gets on the rink. And so it's been impressive to watch, I think, depth-wise. But overall, for me, I think Hellebuck gets overshadowed a little bit because the defense has been so good. You know what I mean? I feel like it hasn't been a lot of talk about how solid Hellebuck has been, but U.S. defense has been awesome to watch. And I think it'll be an exciting game Thursday when these teams start to line up again, if they can stop it again, right? Because I feel like the team I watched yesterday for Canada, yes, it was against Finland. Yes, it was a different lineup. Cale Makar's back in the lineup, but it looked like they were creating a little more and trying to get pucks to the net. And obviously it's a little easier against the Finnish back end versus the United States. So I feel like this will be exciting. Just there's so many different storylines. I know we're going to beat it all up here as this week goes.
Yeah, and I actually see a comment in the chat. I think I just lost it. Is this better? Dylan Larkin has been very good too and made the most of his limited ice time. Last night, that play he made, I think it was the first period. He came down on that tight little like 2-on-1, fakes the pass, like curls his wrists in a way that like faked out Ersan a little bit and hits the crossbar. Like that little move, so subtle but so sick. I mean, the United States must have hit like what 5 or 6 posts last night too. Like, you know, I really thought they were going to find a way to tie that game and find a way to win it late. But Larkin's been another guy who I think goes so underappreciated just because Detroit has not been that good these past few years. And he's been another standout to me. And to your point, I think Hellebuck right now, if I'm picking an MVP through the first few games of this tournament, to me, Hellebuck has been the difference maker. Like that USA-Canada game, you know, it comes down to making the extra save. And while the United States defended really well, you still need the guy back there to make that save when you need it. Like Bennington wasn't able to do it. You know, I think Hellebuck has really stepped up and played well. Would he be your MVP right now as well?
Ooh, that would be a tough call, depending on how the game goes and who scores in the final game. If they were,
well, yeah, I'm saying right now.
Yeah, like he's definitely up there. I think Getzel's up there. I think Werenski. There's been a lot of guys that have been really, really good for the United States. You know, obviously the Chuck brothers. But for me, it's the fact of the matter is like when we talk about Hellebuck, we talk about like big saves, right? He doesn't really make a ton of big saves because he's so good. They're never just routine. Yeah, it's so honestly, as an ex-goalie and a guy that was like, you know, I 6'1", right? I bragged about that a few times, but Kobe kind of cut me down to 6 feet. Like I had to battle, right? I was always athletic and moved well. Like watching him play is insane. He's so good, and this is against the best in the world. So I definitely think he is the guy right now. You can make an argument for a few people, but he's in there, and it's been really fun to watch. I think he snuffs out a lot of plays. And I know Bennington takes a lot of heat. It's been that back and forth, but Hellebuck has really showed at this elite level that he is the guy in the NHL, and he's the best in the world right now.
So here's an interesting comment too from Matthew Mugno. Kyle Connor, Jack Hughes due for a goal? ? Jack Hughes, I think, has gotten mixed reviews in this tournament. To me, Kyle Connor has been a big disappointment.
Yeah.
You know, this is a guy who probably could score or will score 50 goals this year, 100-point player. Like, and in a tournament like this, you know, where he was a guy that started on the first line, someone that you probably expected a lot more out of, I have not noticed him that much at all. And we'll get into these players too. You know, we're going to talk about the Leafs guys. You know, Matthew is not playing last night. Obviously, is a big loss. And, you know, his tournament hasn't been all the best offensively. But are there guys on Team USA right now that, you know, their not reputations, but like the thoughts around them are going to change after this tournament? Like, are those guys that you're thinking about?
Yeah, I think there's like thoughts that will change, right? I think Kyle Connor is Levy one and more. Again, he plays a little bit on the outside, right? Like perimeter game. He had a nice play last night where he cut in and went through the middle, kind of jumped in, had a backhand, but he just seems out of place, right? He just seems like he doesn't grind. He wants to play like a perimeter game. And right now it seems like everything is locked up so tight. I don't think it's going to really leave a black cloud. Like it's going to hurt them a little bit. I think maybe that presence of being in a big game and where they're at. I also think for a lot of these guys, it's going to be what they can do in the playoffs too, right? I feel like as the Stanley Cup playoffs come on, like again, Hellebuck, if Hellebuck plays tomorrow night or on Thursday nights, pardon me, and he wins and gets a shutout and does win MVP, right? Like, yes, you can make the argument for Eichel, for Werenski, for a bunch of players. is it really going to like separate him into that? Like, because again, I know this is a huge game, but it's still not the Olympics. It's still not the Stanley Cup, right? So I feel like you can't really help yourself here necessarily unless you have like the accolades, right? If Jack Eichel wins this, he's already got a national championship. He's got a Stanley Cup, right? There's these guys that already have it, where I feel like for Hellebuyck, it's going to be like, okay, well, now you got to win a 7-game series in the playoffs, right? Now you need to do something come playoff time, right? So I feel like there is always going to be a little bit of that black cloud over you. And again, I think, like you're talking about goalie to goalie, right? Like Bennington's obviously won a game 7. He has a little bit of that accolade, but yes, he is the inferior goalie when you talk about Connor Hellebuyck. And I guess maybe I get a little upset because everyone like shits on Bennington, right? Like, what do you like? He's still a really, really good goalie. He's in a situation where it's been 2-goal games. Yes, there's goals he wants back, but there's so many things he does in his game. And I feel like everybody mailed it in Saturday. Like, wow, USA. It's like, well, they still got to finish the job Thursday. So I feel like it is going to be a big matchup. I'm obviously a little biased. I'm a Canadian. I'm pulling for Canada, but I also love the fact I got friends on either side. So I think it's going to be great either way. And no matter what happens, I think it can be a springboard into a season or a wake-up call for some of these guys. Like, hey, big games, I need to be better.
Well, the bottom line with Bennington too, like in the USA game, sure, you can question the goals he gave up. Maybe Gensel, gets a squeaky one through the 5-hole. And Larkin's shot, you could say he could have made the save because of the distance, but Canada scored 1 goal.
Yeah.
You're not winning that fucking game when you score 1 goal, So I think people have been a little bit too hard on Bennington, to be honest. And listen, going into a big game, like everyone seems to feel very confident that he could be the guy to do it. He has the aura about him that steps up in those big moments. And he still made a lot of big saves against Team USA, I thought, on Saturday night. Like he did. But going back a little bit just to Hellebuyck, the conversation I think that's going to be had Friday morning on this show is which guy can't win the big one, Connor McDavid or Connor Hellebuyck? I mean, I say that half joking, but like, is that a narrative going into this game? Like, which guy needs to win the big one more? Connor McDavid, while he is the best player in the world, no one's denying that, he hasn't won a lot of things in his career, team-wise. He hasn't.
No.
So he might need this more than anyone.
I know. I feel like for him, there is a little bit of pressure too as well, right? I feel like it gets overshadowed a bit because of Bennington. And I think for Hellebuyck, everything has been like pointed at his direction when you talk about winning the big game because Bennington has the cup final, right? Mm-hmm. What I also think is there's so many arguments now as the tournament is going on, like pieces that need to come out, or like we should have had Scheifele, should have had Wilson, where's Tage Thompson? Obviously Hughes is hurt. And then you can make arguments either side, like Petrangelo's not playing, right? There's so many different players, right? I find it so funny because it's such a teeter-totter, right? Where if Canada was to win that game Saturday night, now we're looking at USA being like, Hellebuyck can't win a big game, right? Where it could have been a 2-1 game. These are such fragile games, right? These are games that are like little swings in a certain instance, right? You talk about the Crosby turnover and they go down and score, but like then there was a bad change by Harley, who's a younger guy, which I think Harley played very, very good. I think Harley has been great. I think Taves has been great. There's been a lot of guys on that back end, but it's so thin, these margins, right? So there's always that give and take of like who should be here and what should happen, but it just goes to show you how close it is and how fragile these moments are. And that's why the Getzel goal, the 5-hole goal, this is also, I guess, again, I don't want to be defensive, but it's like, you think Jake Getzel doesn't know what he's doing there? Like, he has an elite release. You think that's the first NHL goalie that he's beat with a sneaky release 5-hole, right? Mm-hmm. He sells high, goes low, and yes, it needs to be a save there. But I also think that there's also the fact that this is, some guys' games don't really translate to the stage, right? And we talk about the guys that haven't performed well. The NHL game is totally different. So you can dominate the NHL because there's going to be lesser opponent than there is here. The time and space and speed. The guys that are the best of the best in the NHL are so much better than the fourth liners, right? There's different guys to find in that role. Now you have everybody who is an elite, like Dylan Larkin. Dylan Larkin play on your fourth line or he can play on your first line. He can do everything. In the NHL, a fourth liner can't play on your first line. He could fill in, but there's going to be a big drop down in his play, right? So I feel like for some of these guys, their games might be better, honestly, Johnny, after the fact when they get back into the regular season, because now they've played against the best of the best. They've grinded harder. And all of a sudden now you're going to have a little more space, a little more time, a little more confidence to go do what you need to do back in the NHL season.
And Zach Phillips is correcting me that McDavid won he was an OHL champ, but not a Memorial Cup champ. He was a U18 champ and a World Junior champ, I guess. So he does have some championships on his resume, but
Well, I think
those
it's a
aren't in the
point that,
last
like, you're
10
saying,
years.
like, he hasn't won on, like, the national, like, the
Yeah,
professional stage, right?
not the
Like, those
pro
are still
level.
championships. That's nothing to talk about. You're talking about the best player in the world.
Yeah, I
When we're
won the
touching the
7th grade
best,
AA state championship. I'm not a
yeah,
champion.
yeah, I won a couple of junior A championships too, right? Like, we used to drink beers and then go to the game. Like,
Yeah.
I think there's the fact of the matter that, like, you just have to, when you're talking about the best of them, you're talking about, McKinnon and these guys, like, you got to have cups. You got to have cups
Yeah.
or Olympic golds. There's got to be,
Something.
that's like the standard when you're talking about the best players in the world.
Yeah. Well, we say it as a joke, but like winning the big one, this will be his biggest win, probably. It will. So that's something that you shouldn't look over. But there's no doubt that Bennington starts Thursday night, right? Like there's no question.
No doubt. The only time that they could have went to Bennington would have been the game against USA. If there was any time that there was a chance
to go away
for him
from him,
to
go away from him.
Yeah, if they would have played Hill Saturday night against USA, then we would have been sitting here coming into the Finland game being like, I'm not sure who goes. But after that, it was straight Bennington. You couldn't go to Hill against Finland in a game that has everything on the line when Bennington played pretty solid against USA. He gave up 2. Yes, you could argue both goals, whatever, but like, and honestly, you know what for me is a big separator for Bennington? I don't know how much people watch this, but for me, this is a huge thing, is his puck handling. He has elite puck handling. And you're talking about a team that clogs it up. Anytime they dump the puck in, he makes good plays. He gets it to their D-man. They get the puck out. That is a huge help. When you're talking about thin margins of stopping the puck, that's a big divider.
Yeah, and I think for the average hockey fan, like they don't know how much of that goes into a game plan, right? Like you're doing cross corner, you have to cross corner dump the puck because you don't want the goalie to play it. It's like having a third defenseman back there. It's a big part of the forecheck, a big part of the pre-scout. Like that's what goes into it. If you're the USA, you're not rimming the puck because Bennington's going to stop it and probably start the breakout for Canada. Like that's a little thing that goes into this game, knowing that he can play the puck back there.
100%, right? I remember playing one time in a series. I was a puck handling goalie, right? Because I always, so what was explained to me was like everything being equal, right? If you're talking about save percentage, goals against, high danger, the deep analytics, right? Everyone's fairly close, right? When you start talking about comparables in the market, right? So now when I'm talking about, I'm going to free agency and they're considering me or they're considering another backup like starter goal mix where I was out of my career. Having the ability to handle the puck is just another asset that just gains more value, right? And you talk about retrievals, you talk about wear and tear on your team, especially come playoff time. And for us, I remember one time we were playing, it was after I left Nashville and I was in St. Louis. They actually had the analytics of which side, if you rim the puck from against Pekka Rinne, you had a better chance of retrieving the puck. Like they knew it down to the fact, like if you hit the glass on his blocker side, there was a better chance of retrieving because he handled the puck so much. So it's like, this is stuff that goes into play. This is things that teams think about, goalies think about, decors think about. And think about if you're going back to get a puck every time and you got Brady Tkachuk counting you, but Bennington has the poise to hold on to it a little longer, make a little play. Now you're not getting hit. That wears you down over a game. I think that's something that's super important to the way Bennington plays.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. And honestly, it's surprising that a lot more goalies like haven't been able to necessarily develop that part of their game. Like you'd think by now, every goalie in the NHL is taught playing the puck, growing up. And I'm sure like 5 years, 10 years from now, every goalie will be able to do it really well. Like, every goalie is going to want to go for the goalie goal. Now it's become like a very common thing. And I'm sure 5 years from now, every goalie, when they get the chance, will go for it. I don't know if when you were playing in your era, if that was like a thing that guys would actually go for, like maybe 1 in every 5 would do it, but it wasn't as common around the entire league like it is now.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I feel like it's something that, again, has evolved. And you look at anything, right? Like even my son's 7 years old. I get on the ice with them and you're like, man, these little kids, like it's crazy what they can do now, right? Comparatively to how it is. Yeah. So it's always that next gen. You learn quicker, right? Goalies learn to handle the puck more. And sometimes it's not about the power of the shot necessarily, right? Like I used to talk about this a lot. Even when I was in junior, I would play a puck. And then sometimes I would find you'd play with a goalie who didn't play the puck. And then he'd want to try to play the puck because it was like, monkey see, monkey do out. Right?
Yeah.
And they try to force plays. And it's like, it's the simple plays that make the most sense. And like, it's a little chip here. It's a little indirect. It's a little just extra patience to force the forechecker to delay toward you a little bit. And those are the things that over a game really help a team. It's not just grabbing the puck. Wow, I shot it really hard along the glass, right? Then you're going to give up possession. You're going to make a 50-50 battle where if you can give your team possession, my theory on it was, Johnny, I can't handle the puck better than an NHL defenseman, right? Let's be totally honest. I don't care how good you are at puck handling. Yes, goalies have a lot of, some goalies just set the puck and get the hell out of the way, right? And I've played with guys like that. get back in the net. But there's also the fact of if you can make a simple, smart play, like a hockey IQ play, it makes everybody's life easier. And I think that's what Jordan Bennington brings to this. And that's what I think we've seen guys now. We look at Marty Turco, Marty Brodeur, guys have watched that, seen that, scored goals. And I think it's just another asset that guys have. But I feel, again, it's like the cognitive sense to make the right play and being cerebral of what's going on that really makes a good puck handling goalie.
Yeah. We have a comment in the chat too from Elias McCracken saying, Helly handles the puck well too. I feel like that's a little bit more discreet. Like I don't really envision, Hellebuyck playing the puck a lot. Maybe he goes behind the net just to stop a rim, but I don't have any image in my head of Hellebuyck like being a good puck mover.
Yeah, he's not bad. He's pretty good. Like he's decent. He's just not as well versed as Bennington. Like he's just not as efficient. He doesn't make a ton of like little plays. If you watch Bennington subtly, like if you went back and watched that game against Finland, it's almost like an easier way to keep yourself in the game too. Something that I thought was super helpful in my career was like getting out, handling pucks. For me, it's the little plays Bennington makes, the little chips, the delays, the little like indirects. And sometimes it's not necessarily just shooting it quickly to a guy. It's like putting a puck to space so he can get to it because he waited that extra second. Like think if you're the forechecker, right, Johnny? Yeah. And the goalie has the puck. What are you taught to do? You're taught to go to the puck or like take him away. So
take away the wall.
Take away the wall, right? Or we'll go direct, right? We'll go through your triangle or we'll chip it by you. And as you're about to get to the wall, I chip it by you. And now all of a sudden you're poised. Now my D-man's heading out the other way. And I think Hellebuyck does a good job. I just don't think Hellebuck's skating is as strong as Bennington's either, right? Like he's more of a blocking goalie, right? He's more stationary. And I think Bennington is an elite skater, his edge work. You watch him lots. He'll flip his hand upside down and he gets his feet, like he mohawk turns and he gets his feet up ice so he can see the play. Carey Price was another one that was very good at it, but he's like sneaky with the plays he makes. And I think it's super important on a decor.
And here's a great question in the chat from Zach Phillips. Hashtag Ask Jonny and Hutz. Should Leafs fans be worried that their players treated the Four Nations like it was round one and pulled the Houdini out? And I do think Marner's overtime goal is the only goal that's been scored by a Leafs player in this tournament so far. Nylander ends his tournament with no goals, I believe, and 2 assists in the 3 games. Austin Matthews, I believe, only 1 assist in the tournament so far. Only played 2 games, obviously. Didn't play last night. But, man, if you're a Leafs fan, like, the narrative that these guys can't play the big boy hockey, like that is not going away anytime soon. And I know you can touch on it more than I can. What have you made of at least those 3 guys over this past week?
I don't want to take a ton of credit away because Mitch Marner obviously scored probably arguably the biggest goal, in his career. But it was at 3-on-3. Again, this is like Mitch Marner's bread and butter. He's a pond hockey player. I love Mitch Marner. I think there's so much talent there, but it's really hard to feel great about that when it wasn't at 5-on-5, right? When we go to the NHL playoffs and there's going to be an overtime in a big game, it's going to be 5-on-5. Someone's going to have a stick on him. Someone's going to be on him. So I guess maybe it's hard to take that away from him because I think it was a big goal and I never want to discredit people. But looking at the big picture of what Toronto's going to deal with come playoff time, we look at the Atlantic Division, we look at the East. There's going to be no easy games, right? There's going to be someone that is on him. He's going to be playing against the best checking forwards. So again, it's just that space, what he does 5-on-5. And I guess William Nylander for me just leaves you wanting more. Feels checked out at times, I guess, but that's the game that William Nylander plays though, right? It's the same thing we've seen all the time. Like he can be the best player on the rink. Then at times it doesn't even look like he is playing. And for Matthews, I know he was out. He just still doesn't look the same. His shot doesn't look the same. He had a chance in that Saturday game where Bennington was on his blocker side and the puck came loose to Matthews and he missed the net, like hit the side of the net.
Hit the side of the net. Yeah. I stood up. I thought that went in.
Like that's a big miss for Austin Matthews, right? Like if I was shooting that puck or one of like a normal human being, you're like, oh, I just missed it. For Austin Matthews, that's a big miss, right? This guy doesn't miss, especially something like that sitting on a tee for him. So he just hasn't felt the same, I think, all year. His release, something's going on. And I think it is worrisome if I'm a Leafs fan. I know they're building toward it. They have the Craig Berube style of play, yada, yada, yada. But when all your big boys aren't getting it done on the big stage and you watch other guys dominate, you watch Nathan McKinnon's been great. McDavid's been great. Jack Eichel's been great. All these other players that have played so well, it just leaves you questioning, like, are these the guys that are going to transition come Stanley Cup time?
But with that said, too, going to Thursday night, like, are you expecting anyone to take a game as big as this over? Like, the talent is so strong out there and the margins are so thin. Like, it's going to be so hard for a player on USA. Like, obviously, McDavid and McKinnon stand out with their speed and McCarr, too, with their skating. But on the USA side, like, I don't know, outside of maybe the physicality, if we're talking just pure skill, if they have someone that will take over the game, like the Kachucks are going to like use their body to get into it and that will stand out. But I don't know if it's going to be as evident, for someone to be a game breaker against Team Canada when, Saturday night it was all team defense and focusing on shutting plays down. And I thought Matthews did a great job playing defensively. Jack Hughes, one of those too. I said it yesterday. I thought he made a lot of little plays in his own D zone to get the puck out, which, don't really make the highlight reel. But that's something that these players are going to have to buy into to win this game on Thursday night, not doing the flashy stuff, making the little plays to shut the middle down on Team Canada, because that's where they want to make their plays. And that's what it's going to take. I just don't see someone on the Team USA side that's really going to take over this game on Thursday night. It's going to take a lot of, little things and I guess, a hyper focus on making the simple plays. It's going to be like a 2-1, 1-0. Like I don't think it's going to be a high scoring game.
No, I agree. I think it's just not that I'm saying like the Toronto players haven't had like game breaking capabilities or like dominate a game. Cause I don't really think I think it's really hard to dominate a game at this level, especially best on best, but it's like those little moments, defining moments in the game. Right. And I think that's what it's going to come down to. It's going to come down to a little opportunity or break where somebody makes a big play, and it's going to be a difference maker in the game. Right. We look at like the Dylan Larkin taking advantage of a turnover and a bad change, and he finds a way to, get the winning goal. So I do think it's going to be a game of margins. The margins are so thin, like razor thin at this level. So again, I think there's certain players. It's going to be defined, I believe, by just a certain little break here or there, something that happens. I don't think you're going to see a track meet. I don't think you're at a level where these guys are too well groomed. Even some of the clips that they showed in that Canada USA game, the way they defended the neutral zone in layers was unbelievable. Right. There was just no presence, right? You beat one guy, the next guy's there. And it's hard, like, especially McDavid, I thought, like, trying to create speed through the neutral zone. They took it all away. McAvoy with a huge hit on him. And I do like what Canada's done with their lineup, getting Braden Point there, someone that could skate with them, because Reinhardt isn't the best, skater per se. He's more a hockey IQ guy and finds places. So I think they've done a good job of, like, having someone that can play with McDavid with some speed.
Yeah, I'd say Reinhardt is more of like maybe a more skilled Mark Stone, if that makes sense. Like, I don't want to say their stride is similar, but their overall speed north-south is probably similar. Do you have, like, I don't want to say an X factor, but someone for Team Canada that you think maybe didn't play as well Saturday night that needs to step up, come Thursday night? Is there someone that you were very unimpressed by in the game on Saturday?
In the game Saturday, I thought the game Saturday, I didn't like Crosby. I didn't think Crosby was very good Saturday night against USA. I thought he was a little bit, I don't know if it's the injury that he's dealing with. I thought he was better last game. I think that's important. Like, he's a leader and there's a lot of weight in his shoulder. I thought Nate McKinnon wasn't great against USA. I thought he was much better last game. He seems like a guy that, plays on emotion. I would assume that he's going to be ready to rock. And I think overall it's going to be those mixed lines. I think the third and fourth lines are going to be the difference maker for USA, right? I think Marchand is going to have a lot on his shoulder. And it's going to be that Travis Konechny, Sam Bennett. Interesting.
Yeah. Marchand's the guy that I was thinking more of too, because in a game like that, the chippiness, that we saw right off the bat, like, I didn't think Marchand really had the Brad Marchand effect that we're used to seeing in a game like that, where that's a game to me where he'd thrive in.
Thriving, right? Like, that's right up his alley. And I think that's what we need to see from him, in Thursday night, right? Because I feel like there's going to be a lot of energy, right? I think JT Miller's been sneaky good for USA too. He's played on the edge. He hasn't really gone over it, right? So I think there is that dramatic. And I think for me, it's the fact of the matter is those guys have to log some minutes where they're either creating energy and they're shutting down. They're not giving up any chances, right? And I think that's going to be important. And for me, it's that guy in and out. And I agree. We've made arguments about Hyman being there, Scheifele being there, but they went with Konechny and they went with Seth Jarvis, right? Jarvis was out of the lineup. I just don't see Travis Konechny again. Again, I don't know where they go with this lineup, but those are going to be very important minutes as we look down the depth when Dylan Larkin was the game breaker, right? And he's a guy that isn't on the top line. He's a guy that found a way to contribute it, because all these guys know how to score goals, who can make a big play, because the first line and second line, they're going to have the hardest matchups, right? So someone can really break this game open with a chance here, especially deeper in the lineup.
It's a hard question to ask, but do you think there's a coaching edge in this game as well? You look at Team USA, they've made a few adjustments with their lines. Obviously you look at how they coached the game on Saturday night. Mike Sullivan, John Tortorella, and the rest of their staff has done a great job. One move that I think has been, I guess a little bit more significant is Adam Fox. He kind of started the tournament as Team USA's top defenseman, and now he's dropped down to like a bottom pair 6D. Like, that's something that's been pretty big, at least, from the Rangers perspective, noticing that, he's a guy that if he's not running your power play or really chipping in offensively, it's tough to really notice him. And I say that as a friend of his. Like, it hasn't been the best showing and it's been really tough, but has there been one adjustment or one move that's been made? Maybe it is Reinhart, making that top line, or John Cooper putting together the Tampa guys, as a third line. Has there been one switch up to you that's been noticeable?
I obviously, I think that switch up has been huge, right? I think that's been the biggest impact so far, is moving Reinhart down. I think giving McDavid points, someone that can skate with him. And I think Marner getting off him, because I feel like Marner was like just such a playmaker. He's trying to do too much at times, I think, in those situations. And for me, the USA, like, I don't really know if you can say this is coaching, truthfully. Like, there's so many weapons here, right? I do like the fact that they moved Seth Jarvis out, because I think come Thursday, Travis Konecny can play a difference in this, right? So again, you can touch on coaching, but again, I think this is so fragile. Like, we're trying to find the right combo, but at the same time, like, we look back on Saturday and it's a 2-1 hockey game, right? Other than an empty netter. Like, it's so fragile. I don't really know if there's going to be a dramatic impact in coaching that's going to make the change. And again, I think it's going to be more injury based here, right? Like, I hated the fact last night that USA was short a player, because that is just not like, and then, Tkachuk gets hurt, right? Then something happened to Trocheck's hand. Like, it feels like, not that they were trying to sit guys out. Like, I'm sure there's some stuff that's gone on behind the scenes that we don't know about. But again, like, every game is so important. So you want to see them at their best as well.
Yeah, and we have an interesting comment here. I'm just curious what you think of this. Hear me out. This is from Dacky. Swap Stone and Marchand on the McDavid line. What do you make of that?
I don't mind that. The only problem, I guess, would be, like, is Stone sliding down to that part. I think Stone is just such a hockey IQ guy. He, like, protects McDavid, in my opinion, right? Like, Stone is, like, not fleet of foot, right? He's slower. He finds space. He's so skilled with his stick. And then Marchand is a little more on the forecheck. So the only thing would be is, like, if Marchand gets caught up ice a little bit with McDavid, always pushing the pace constantly, especially with Braden Point. I think Braden Point kind of is the Brad Marchand. He's just like a more modern version of it. He can, like, win pucks on walls and force pucks. So I don't hate that idea. I just think when you move Stone down, now you have a guy that's going to be more in a checking role. And I think Brad Marchand suits the checking role more, in my personal opinion. Yeah,
and if Colby was here, he'd be raving about Braden Point. It's probably Colby's, like, one of his favorite players in the NHL.
He's unbelievable. I think he's just like the younger Marchand, right? I think Marchand is done, like, he's already done what Braden Point's doing now, in a sense. And I feel like if you put McDavid in him, now you don't have a guy that's like your high F3, that's a little smarter, that's a little more like feeling the play, where I get getting Reinhart away, because now you have two of them that are a little bit slower of foot. No one's really keeping pace, where Point speed can really keep pace with McDavid.
And you mentioned the injuries just a second ago. And listen, I don't want to be dramatic here, but does the conversation around the injuries, obviously mostly for USA since Cale Makar, and it wasn't injury, it was illness, played the other day, does it almost take away from Thursday night's game, even though I do think all these guys probably will play? Maybe McAvoy is the one I'm most concerned about, because it was reported that he was checked into a hospital here in Boston yesterday. So maybe he's the one guy who doesn't play. I do think Matthew Tkachuk gets back in. I do think Austin Matthews gets back in. But, what is this injury conversation doing right now to the conversation? Do you think it's put a damper on it just a little bit?
No, I think that's a safety net. I think that's like like, you're still, obviously you want to go best on best, but you can make the argument that, like, Pietrangelo is arguably a top
Quinn Hughes. Yeah.
He was right. There's guys that are missing. Like, you just have to play the hand you're dealt, right? I feel like it's really tough to, of course, you want to see best on best. You don't want guys to be injured, but, like, it's a war of attrition, right? It's the same thing in the Stanley Cup, right? You need guys to be healthy. This is part of the deal that comes with it, right? Sidney Crosby sat on the bench when they won the Cup against the Detroit Red Wings in the last period of the game, being hurt, period and a half, right? This stuff happens. You have to deal with it. So again, and then, like, then maybe they look back to that Saturday night and, like, they shot out like they used all their bullets up and they got hurt and there's some injuries and stuff, right? So I don't think you can look back on it and have any regret. I feel like that's a cop-out by people watching from the outside, right? There's best on best, and I think teams have to have that next man up mentality, because on the same sense, the team that loses, you can make the argument of that, or they could be like, well, Tage Thompson should have been on the team.
Yeah. Well, I see comments in the chat, like, it's Team Canada versus half the U.S. roster because they're all playing hurt.
Well, no, it's like, that's so, like, but then you can make the argument like, well, Scheifele should have been there, or like, well, we're missing Pietrangelo. Like, I feel like that's just nonsense in my personal opinion.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And listen, I want to get into just our Bet365 bet of the night here coming soon, but I do want to ask you one question, and I want to get the chat's opinion as well. So, chat, pay attention here. If there's one narrative that you can maybe bring to the front going into Thursday night's game, what would be the biggest storyline, or what would that narrative be for you? And I want comments in the chat too, saying like, what is the biggest storyline? Is it revenge for Canada? Is it the winner of this game now, owns hockey for the time being? Like, where are we at in this conversation between USA and Canada? Is it an individual matchup like Matthew Tkachuk versus Connor McDavid? We obviously saw the cross checks in the game the other night behind the play. Tkachuk getting under the skin of Crosby and McDavid. Like, there's so many little intricacies about this matchup that I find so interesting, and I feel like everyone's opinion is a little different.
Yeah, I feel like win or lose, obviously I'm biased. I'm pulling for Canada, right? And I'm sure you got, how do I word this? I don't even think it matters. Like, at the end of the day, I feel like it's just unbelievable where USA and Canada are at in hockey, right? It just goes to show you that I feel like we are two dominant nations when it comes to hockey. The depth we have at every position is unbelievable. And I think USA goaltending would be that one argument where it'd be like, right now they're better. But I also feel like this is cyclical, right? There's going to be guys that come up through Canada that are really good. I think the storyline going into it is just big moments for certain players, right? I think you got to look at McDavid. This is a big coming out party for him. Can he get it done in a big game? Can he push it over the top? I think for USA, obviously you want to have a healthy Austin Matthews, what he can do in a big game. And again, I think Connor Hellebuyck, I think this is going to travel pretty far with a guy that, you could probably put on the Mount Rushmore of goalies now at this point. He's getting up to the point where he is like one of the best to play the position without any accolades, right? Without a Four Nations Cup, I can guess. And then Stanley Cup success, right? So I feel like there is so many storylines. It's kind of like the Tkachuk brothers, these Bash brothers, the way that the game started. I just think like hockey's in such a good place. And again, you can make arguments about the injuries, guys not there, guys there. I think both teams are, without guys. Shea Theodore's out. There's guys there's so many guys in this lineup that are missing. I just think where hockey's at, it's unbelievable, I think, for this game to work out this way, the way this tournament went, especially reflecting on it. When we were heading into this, there was talk they weren't sure if guys were going to show up. Like, are guys going to play their hearts out? Are guys going to play hard? And I think the question's been answered, that there's still a lot of pride when it comes to USA versus Canada.
And there's a lot of good comments in the chat too. I'm just reading as you were talking. Tommy T saying the storyline is on the GMs and how teams are built. Obviously that was a big storyline in the World Juniors for Team Canada. We got NY Boost saying it's the gap in goaltending. The USA has grown. That will most likely decide this game. J-Rock, how the NHL took away international hockey from us because of greed and negotiation tactics. Matt Mugno, not a landmark, but the start of a massive hockey ownership war. Every 2 years we get tourneys now, not going to last long. There are a lot of good opinions just about storylines in the chat that I love seeing. And let's see, we got lean into highlights for the best players making big plays, sell the sport, get some butts and seats for the NHL that resumes 2 days later. Ben Benya, playoff Gensel is a juggernaut. Interesting. I don't know about that one. But yeah, all these comments are great. And to me, the storyline I would go with, I guess, is that, Hockey Canada was on its own level, for so many years. And I don't know if I could say this fairly, but the United States has done such an incredible job at trying to grow the game in different areas and different states of our country. And, not being Canadian, I don't know if Canada has done the same thing, but USA hockey to me has come such a long way. And I don't know if Canada has necessarily continued to grow in that way, where, maybe it's a look in the mirror for Hockey Canada and what they do now going forward, and how they, develop their younger players like the United States has with the NTDP and all these different programs that kids are coming up playing in, where Hockey Canada is just a little bit different in that sense. And, maybe it was a don't fix what isn't broken system for a long time for Hockey Canada. And now that other countries like the United States has caught up, maybe it changes their approach going forward. Like, that's maybe something that I would lean into. And that's obviously a bigger picture thing than just a game on Thursday night. But maybe that's something you could speak to as well, just as far as development goes in Canada.
Yeah, I don't think there's like a lack of development in Canada by any means. I also think that it's an arms race too, right? And you talk about a country that was definitely behind years ago, USA. And now you talk about big hubs that have way more money, that have way more people, that have way more money in training. And it's just natural that they're going to catch up and get better, right? So I don't really think that like Canada is doing something wrong by any means. Yeah. We're also a smaller population that has to deal with different circumstances. So I feel like USA has done an unbelievable job of investing money in it, creating facilities where guys can train. I think back to my days in St. Louis, the one year, I don't know how many kids went in the first round. That was like the Keller draft. Kachuk, all those kids. But you have guys now, you have teams in locations. You have Austin Matthews coming out of Arizona. You know, the Coyotes are there. And even for me getting this chance to be in Arizona, my son was part of the Little Howlers program. So he was 4 or 5. And it was like $200. And they got every piece of equipment. And that was including all their ice time. So it's just like they've made it affordable. They've pumped money into it. They have beautiful facilities. They have opportunities for kids to succeed. And then they have the population, right? They have people in hubs that like want to play. Now it's not just in markets like Minnesota or Boston or New York. It's everywhere. Hockey's worldwide. And I think USA has done a great job of that. And I think just over time, you're seeing the benefit of it, right? The national program's unbelievable. I think Canada maybe could look at something like that, right? Where they have a place to train young guys instead of them just always going to just major junior or whatever NCAA team they play, where players are the best of the best are with each other all the time. You're just going to get better, right? It's just natural for guys to develop and get better. And I think when we look at that program, how many guys have come through. So I think USA has done a great job of that. But at the end of the day, I think it's just been organic, right? It's been like they've put hockey in non-traditional markets. They've had teams there. Hockey's now cool, right? I think they've sold the game. Like they've branded players and guys want to be like Austin Matthews. And I joke around with like my son and their buddies now. They're like, my son loves William Nylander because he's like on TV and he's cool and they have like a chain on and it's stuff that like, I feel like they've done a great job just in hockey branding guys. And I think for Team USA, it goes through and through. Like Austin Matthews is with Justin Bieber. They're showing up UFC fights. I think hockey has just really done a great job of branding its players, and the growth of it has been awesome. And I think it's a credit to USA. So I don't want to discredit Canada by any means. I think it was more USA catching up and Canada just trying to hold pace with the facilities and the population we have.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And I saw one comment in the chat too from Ariel Cornfeld, I believe. Yeah, Cornfield is her last name. I need to see Brady in the playoffs after watching him in this tournament. The guy was built for big time games. And honestly, that's something that, you know, could be a takeaway from this tournament too. Like maybe that old school hockey mentality. Kids want to grow up now and be like the Kachucks, you know, instead of, you know, we all wanted to grow up and be like Patrick Kane. You know, we wanted to be that skill guy, the fancy guy. You know, the guy who had all the highlight reel goals, the guy who had the 6 sellies, but maybe that like, you know, 10-year-old to 13-year-old kid right now that's watching this tournament is like, oh, I want to be the badass. You know, I want to be like the Kachuk brothers. And maybe that's something, if USA wins, that's a big takeaway as well, right? And maybe not the McDavids or Crosbys or McKinnons, who, you know, obviously are the best players in the world and have a ton of skill, but maybe it is like that hockey player identity that it used to be, right? Like the guy who had the skill, but the guy who also wasn't afraid of anything, fearless, would fight, throws the body, like that does every little thing that the Kachucks have done in this tournament. You know, that to me has been such a standout thing as well.
Yeah, I was on yesterday with Jeff on the sheet, and I kind of made that point. I was like watching it, and I said, like, are we going to see more like the Chuck style players now, right? Because you know it's like cyclical too, right? Like I feel like we've early in the 90s, right? It was all stick work. There was no space, and then all of a sudden we got rid of that. Then the skill went through the roof. Now it's like I think Jeff Merrick made a great point of that. Is like, everything now is skill-based, right? Like every kid is just so well-groomed. Everyone can skate. You don't see bad skaters. Everyone can handle the puck. Hands are crazy. Now it's like, okay, what else can you do? Like, where's that defining element in your game? Like, do you have that snarl in your game? Are you going to run through a wall? Are you going to, like, you know, have an edge to you? Yeah, right. But it's a difference maker, right? And you know what's funny to me is, like, I watched Colton Parayko and I played with him. I'm good friends with him. And that was like the knock on him, right? They used to beg him to be mean. They used to beg him. It's not in his DNA, right? Like, because he has that edge. Like, obviously he can fight. He did well against JT Miller there. He fed him his lunch, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But he doesn't do that, right? He doesn't have that game. But now imagine Colton Parayko played that way. Imagine he was like a guy, when you came to the front of the net, you were getting stuck. You had like, you know, he played like a Brandon Dillon, right? Where that's not necessarily his game. But now if, say, you start adding some pieces like that, man, your team becomes very dangerous. So I feel like that is a value of, I talk about goaltending and I talk about save percentage and stats and where you're at, and puck handling being that little extra thing. Now, if you got that little snarl in your game where you can do stuff and, you know, guys, those are the players you want. Because come playoff time, you're looking at these ultra talented players. Who do you want on your team in the playoffs? You want Brady Tkachuk. You want JT Miller. You want Brad Marchand. You want guys that are going to go in the corner and come out with the puck, or going to make other guys pay consistently all the time. Then you put that in a 7-game series, man, you become very dangerous.
Yeah. And my last question for you, again, great point. just to almost kind of wrap up today's show, this might be, me exaggerating a little bit, but which team right now going into Thursday do you think is in the better spot? Injuries aside, from Team USA, just after yesterday, Canada gets the win, USA gets the loss. Hellebuck, gets the game off, so he's not going to see game action for, 5 or so days. Bennington saw game action yesterday, and the pressure of playing in front of the home crowd. Like, to me, I think Canada's in the better spot right now, and I'm wondering if you agree.
I do. I still think the X factor is Hellebuck and net, right? Just for the way he has played, the way he's looked so far, he's made it look easy. I was kind of surprised that they didn't give him the game yesterday, just because now it's like he played Saturday night. Now you got Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday off, where this is a guy that's used to playing a lot of games. I think Canada's in a good spot. I think confidence-wise, getting Cale Makar back, having them healthy, I think having a few days. But again, I think this is still going to be a coin flip game, right? Again, I think there is a little bit of pressure on Bennington again. But if there's a guy that knows how to handle it, he's won a Game 7 and a Stanley Cup in this building in similar fashion, kind of as the underdog. Boston was really good in that series. So I feel like there is a lot of pressure, and I feel like it's still kind of Canada's crown, in my opinion, at this point, right? Like, they won the round robin game. Now this is a game. This is a chance for USA to really make that statement, to be like, North America is our hockey, right? I still think it's a coin flip. I think it's both. We have two powerhouses countries in hockey, but this is a really big game. I think there's definitely more pressure on USA for them to, really do something, especially when you have Crosby leading you, I think, for Team Canada.
Yeah, no, I agree. And just a reminder, we do have a show on Friday, so we will be talking about the championship game on Thursday night, Friday morning. So don't forget, because we don't usually do Friday morning shows. Colby will hopefully be back if he's feeling better. So just want to remind you there. And with that, let's get into our Bet365 bet of the night. And we were talking about MVPs of the tournament so far. I said I think it's got to be Hellebuck. But looking at the odds, if you're going to pick an MVP, to me, if Canada wins, it's going to be Sidney Crosby. I think he's been their best player for most of the tournament. Obviously he didn't have his best game against Team USA, like you mentioned, Carter, on Saturday. But, for most of the big plays that have been made for Team Canada, Crosby's been the one doing it. And yesterday, Finland scores those couple goals late to make it scary. Crosby makes that big hit in the neutral zone, puts home the empty netter to secure the win. And I believe his odds are at a little bit north of plus 500. Yeah, Sidney Crosby's at plus 550. Connor Hellebuck is the favorite right now at plus 260. Is there anyone on this list, Carter, that stands out to you the most that you would pick as the MVP? Maybe the Tkachuk brothers.
Yeah, like if one of the Kachucks maybe have a big game, right? I think I can play like devil's advocate, take both sides here. But like, if one of the, Brady scores a big goal or Matthew scores a big goal, I think that comes into the question. I think Hellebuck obviously is the favorite if he's able to win. If they win and it's a 1-goal game or less, he's obviously going to be MVP in my opinion. But for me, the value on this buy, I think, might be Nathan MacKinnon, because he's a breaker, and at plus 700, I feel like he's no different than Connor McDavid, I think, the way this tournament has gone for him. I don't think he was great that Saturday night, but he was very good yesterday. He was very good in the game against Sweden. If he has a game-breaking play, I think that really push him over the top to be like, if he gets the game-winning goal on a beauty or something like that, I think there's value at plus 700.
Ben Benya is saying Gensel as his MVP. We know he's very vocal about Jake Gensel so far in the chat today. Is this better? Vincent Trocheck has had some big moments. Never count him out. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. Also, Vinny Trocheck is another guy who looked hurt last night, shaking his right hand the entire night. I'm not exactly sure. I think it was a block shot that got him. That maybe stung him a little bit. But yeah, those are the MVP odds right now going to Thursday. Maybe something changes tomorrow. But that's going to wrap up today's show, Carter, unless you have any final thoughts. Again, I really appreciate you stepping in this morning. Colby texted us saying that he still wasn't feeling well and feeling up to do the show. So I texted you at like 9 a.m. and asked if you could do this. And we really or 8 a.m., excuse me. And really appreciate you stepping in. But I want to give you the floor here for any final thoughts. And Vic putting up his own real MVP. Any final thoughts before we let you go?
No, that's it, buddy. I'm glad to jump on. I was flipping pancakes, getting my kids ready for school when you called me. So just like any good backup goalie, buddy, I'm ready whenever you need me. So thanks for having me on, and always good chatting. And Vic, good to be back, buddy. It was nice watching your Instagram stories of your honeymoon, just watching all the turtles you saw in Africa.
You could pop your face in, Vic. Don't be afraid. But we will have Jason Demers on tomorrow from NHL Network. Does a lot of stuff with the league, former NHL defenseman, obviously, and working on getting Mike Richter as well as a guest for tomorrow's show. So tune in tomorrow, 9 a.m. Chat, we love you. You were great today, Vic. You're always the best, always on the ball, and we'll see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Everyone have a great day.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Saravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.